What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Tonight, we're here for a live stream. We wanted to hit a startup Dynasty mock draft for you guys. So, just a little bit of setting, some context for you guys. We'll throw it on the screen as well. But 12 team, Superflex, tight end premium, full point per reception. And we're also going to do a half point tight end premium, start 10. We'll go 11, 12 rounds, get something in there for you guys. But tonight, I am not doing this solo. We're not doing it with War. We're not doing it with anybody who has been on this channel before, but he is a familiar face. You guys know the guy. So let's bring him into the building and let's introduce the ATM, baby. How you doing, Adam?
Hi, what's going on, man? Appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to drafting from this 108 spot. When I took it, also noticing that it wasn't third round reversal, so I'm like, I'm gonna like this little challenge now here.
Yeah, man, I debated actually doing the third round, but I was like, I think the last mock draft you and I did together was a third round reversal. So I was like, let's just switch it up. Let's do something different. But we got a couple people in the building here. We got Tyler in the building. We have Abdul in the building. So we got some folks in here, but we're
What up,
about to start
everybody?
drafting this mock draft right now. Let me pull this up on the screen actually so we can start going. And I'll hit start because I know the folks are eager tonight because they've been messaging in there for the last like couple hours.
Yeah, impatience is high, man. They're no intro. Like, let's get this thing on the road. They're saying, I'm with it though.
Hey, look, I'll start the draft so they can chill out for a second. But Abdul is on the clock, and dude, he wasted no time.
Yeah,
Josh Allen, are you in the ballpark of saying Josh Allen is the number one?
yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty close for me between him and Pat Mahomes, but right now I'll take Josh Allen. Him losing the weapons, obviously, you know, it makes it a little bit shakier for me, but I feel like the floor is so high with his rushing.
Yeah, I agree. I think Josh Allen, he's my number one. I think any of these guys, for the most part, I'll take Allen or Mahomes there, and that's 10 tier for me. And then also, am I out of pocket for still having Jalen Hurts in that tier with
No.
those three guys? Like, I think he should low-key still be up there, and he's going to be my pick for me.
Okay, I was actually curious to see what you do here, but I'll say this: I'm with you as far as the way I think the player, like what his upside realistically for fantasy purposes. Oh my goodness, I was hoping to maybe get CD at the 108, but that,
Sheesh.
whew. But what I was going to say about Hurts is the only reason I won't put him in that same tier right now, Andrew, is because I feel like in from a trading perspective, I don't think that he is viewed the same. But I'm with you. I think that he offers damn near, if not the exact same upside that a guy like Josh Allen or Mahomes does, personally.
Yeah, people, for whatever reason this offseason, and I don't know what it is, maybe we can dive a little bit into this, but people are like out on Jalen Hurts this offseason for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
maybe it's because he was injured last year, like in the back half of the year. Maybe people are worried that with no Jason Kelsey, there's going to be no tush push. What do you think it is with the market right now? Why are people down on him?
I feel like, a guy like Jalen Hurts, this is right or wrong, but I feel like a lot of times guys that didn't have the draft capital. So there was a lot of people that didn't necessarily buy into Jalen Hurts, and then the way he finished the season, very shaky as far as their wins and losses. I feel like that's really carrying over a lot into, like to me anyway. The guy has a contract that says he's going to be there for a long time, and his fantasy points per game weren't really dropping off a ton, even though they were losing football games. So I don't necessarily make that same connection, but I feel like that probably is baked into why people are so down on him. They feel like his long-term security is not there when the contract does not say that, in my estimation. He's going
Yeah,
to be there
at
for a
all.
minute.
And also, they've now secured every weapon around him for the foreseeable future. I mean,
They
AJ Brown on
did.
a long-term contract, Smith on a long-term contract, even Saquon is on like what, a 3-year deal?
Yeah, I mean, they opened up the pocketbook this offseason, man. They secured everybody in a meaningful manner this offseason. So I'm with you. I think Jalen Hurts should be. The only reason I won't put him there is strictly because I think the value, people don't quite value him the same as a guy like Mahomes or Allen. But to
Fair
me,
enough.
he would be 100% in my. He'd probably be the third person I'd take off the board, honestly, and then I would take Lamar fourth.
Fair enough.
Okay.
What are you thinking here? Because we've
Yeah.
had an interesting start to this draft.
Very
They
much.
said
Wow.
no one likes the QBs. We had all the wide receivers come off. We had
Dude,
2 running backs at the turn.
I'll say this. I was very strongly considering taking A Rich instead of Jefferson, but I felt like I had to just take Jefferson at 108. I was surprised he was the third receiver taken off the board here. I've got to, I think at this point, take Caleb Williams. For me personally, this is a
Yeah.
guy I'm surprised is still on the board, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, he's the best QB on the board for me right now.
Yeah, and I just don't feel like the receivers. Once you get past Harrison, for me, those 5 receivers. It's not that I don't like some of the other guys. I like AJ Brown quite a bit. I like Puka, but I think that I just don't view their value insulation anywhere the same. I also really like. I'm starting to really. I'm probably gonna have to move Garrett Wilson in my ranks, man. I'm starting to get uncomfortably high on Garrett Wilson now.
Okay, why? What's changing for you right now to keep moving him up?
The market value for him right now, anyway, seems to almost have him the same. I'll be curious to see how quickly he comes off the board, but I do think that. I do think that the combination of that, plus I think that if Aaron Rodgers is playing, even if he's not a old version of himself, I think he's an upgrade enough to where the targets that he's getting should put him in a much closer picture with points scored than he has been in the years past. That's kind of the reason I'm starting to come around on Garrett Wilson personally.
Fair enough. And
what do you
speaking
think?
of Garrett, I mean, I agree. I have loved Garrett Wilson
here?
for a long time, and I'm looking at it right now, and I'm debating him. I'll tell you a couple names I'm debating right now, and I'll say them, and they'll all get picked around the turn just because that's how these go. But I'm thinking AJ Brown. He's one of the highest guys in my ranks right now. Yep. Garrett Wilson and Justin Herbert's still on the board right here. This kind of feels like
those are the 3 that I think are. I honestly wouldn't hate any one of those 3. I think it's really close. I don't hate doing. I personally love the double quarterback approach, but if you didn't want to go that, I'd probably lean Garrett Wilson for the youth, but. AJ Brown in his own right still a stud, and you can definitely do this, which is stacking.
I'm gonna go AJ, and it was the stack. That's what I guess threaded that needle for me. I really wanted Justin Herbert, and look, those are the next.
Look at the yeah. I was just about to say I didn't want to interrupt you, but the next 2 picks, of course, are going to be those guys. I don't think that was because you said it, for the record. I think those were clearly a tier of those 3 in my personal opinion.
I agree, and I'll tell you what, I passed on Justin Herbert only because I feel like. There's a couple guys here who, even though I don't think they have the floor or the safety feeling to me as Justin Herbert does, because we've seen Justin Herbert do it, but you still have Jaden Daniels on the board. Yep. You still have a guy like Trevor Lawrence. You still have a guy like Dak Prescott. Like, there's all of these guys still on the board that I think you could draft and still get that production that Justin Herbert would give you.
I like you kind of walking through that. One of the things, like, I remember we were talking about a mock draft we did in person at BDG, and I was kind of asking you if you could go back and redo it, and people were like, "Oh, Adam's trying to tell him how to draft." One of the things I like doing is sequencing, though. I just like talking about sequencing. Like, I think the way you just said that is very smart, because now you just spoke it into existence where you have Trevor Lawrence here. So instead of having to take now Malik Neighbors is off the board, so the next receiver would be Olave, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, you took Dak, right? Yeah,
I took Dak. Yeah.
Okay. Even better. So, but like flip flop that, you would have to have taken now, like if you would have taken, let's say, Herbert there, your receiver, or what would you have done at that pick 3 if you inverse this out now? Do you follow what I'm saying?
So like if I take Herbert at 2, what do I do here?
Yeah.
Oh man, I think at that point I have to take Olave. He would be the pick that probably would have been between Olave and it would have been between Drake London. It would have been those 2 guys probably.
I think that is probably the correct play. And I feel like personally, at least for me, I like Dak Prescott, AJ Brown pairing much more than Herbert and Olave or Herbert and
I do too.
London. So I think you made the right call.
I went with Prescott over Lawrence, even though in my dynasty rankings, I do have T-Law above Dak in my dynasty rankings due to the youth. But getting AJ Brown, when I took him over Garrett Wilson, that was kind of more of a win now play. And then you get Dak Prescott, who's definitely a better win now piece than Trevor Lawrence. So it's kind of putting my roster almost, it feels like right now, where I was trying to stay fluid, but now I have Hurts, Brown, and Prescott. And this feels like a team that if you build this correctly, you could be making a run at a championship over the next 2 or 3 years.
I was on mute there. My bad. Absolutely. Yeah. I love your start, for the record. Yeah, I really do. I was between, there was a few guys I was looking at, kind of got my time down there a little bit further than I wanted to. But for me, it's Rome Odunze. I really, really like Rome, the prospect he is. I feel like the receiver room feeling crowded is allowing Rome to be drafted at a spot that he just truthfully, in my estimation, shouldn't be able to be drafted at right here.
Agreed.
So that's kind of why I took him there. I don't think it's going to come back to me. Another thing, though, I will say in sequencing, right? Johnny Detroit, I do think at the 404, he's probably watching this too, so I'll tip him off. he needs a quarterback, right? But I just
Oh,
look and there's two. I see Dubridge already took 2 quarterbacks at the turn, and there's a few QBs in my queue right now that I'm hoping would make it back to me. So I was between him and another quarterback, actually still on the board. So yeah, I don't think it'll
okay.
make it to me, but that was kind of the reason I took Rome there.
Fair enough. We got a question here from Tyler, and he says, "What's the latest you would punt the receiver position to if you went double QB or hero running back early?" So, where's the latest you would want to take that wide receiver one?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I will say, Andrew, I've actually kind of often like internally I think about this. I almost never see the board fall and push me to my extreme. I would say probably round 4, I would feel really uncomfortable if I didn't have at least one receiver. But if you told me that I had 2 quarterbacks in Jahmyr Gibbs or 2 quarterbacks in Brees Hall or something like that, I can probably get on board with waiting until about round 4. It's just after round 4 now. Like if you tell me I'm not going to get a receiver till round 5, Andrew, that means I'm probably having like my number 1 receiver on my team as like a guy in the 20s in range of Dynasty, and I just feel like it's really hard to get those high end assets at receiver. So that's why I typically don't like to wait even until round 4.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you because I've actually done it in a startup this year where my first wide receiver off the board, I want to say was in the 4th round, and it was Brandon Ayuk. And that
Okay.
was the latest that I ever pushed one. And I was like, okay with Ayuk coming off as my number 1. I did go the double quarterback early. I also took a top like S tier running back as well. I took Jonathan Taylor in that draft. So that is the farthest that I've pushed it, but I wouldn't go into that next level of wide receiver where you're probably talking about like Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, Tank Dell, T Higgins. Like, I don't want that guy to be my number 1.
No, I'm with you. I feel like I can't envision a scenario. I can envision a scenario where, like you just said, where you've actually done it. I can envision the scenario where I take a receiver first off the board in the 4th round. I can't. I just can't envision where I don't do that. Where I wait until the 5th round. I'll tell you the only play that would happen is if there's an extreme quarterback that fell down the chart. So I just draft my 3rd one to try to flip later.
Yeah,
Outside of that scenario, I don't think I'm doing it.
fair
Barkley
enough.
goes off the board. Okay, what do you think
Abdul,
here?
I was going to say, Abdul says this is an example of the question because he has McCaffrey and Taylor with Josh Allen. So he's punting.
Let's see
But what
his
do I
team
think
there.
here?
Yeah, I'm curious what you think here. I got 2 guys in my queue, but I'm curious what your view is of what guys you would take in my spot here.
Without showing my full hand, which
Oh
a couple
yeah,
guys that
you're coming up. You
couple
don't have to
guys
answer the question.
no,
if you don't
a
want
couple
to.
guys that come to mind would be like I like ETN here, I like Pittman, I like Kincaid, I like Nico. If you wanted another quarterback, maybe Jared Goff here.
Actually, funny. It's funny you named the guys in my queue. I got Pittman, Kincaid, and Nico. I feel like I don't want to take ETN quite yet.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with Pittman. I really like Michael Pittman. I know he kind of is viewed as not, I don't know, fake alpha, I guess. I don't view him that way. I think he's a guy that earned an insane amount of targets and he continues to earn more. I feel like if this offense takes a step forward with A-Rich, maybe it's a little bit lower passing than it was last year with him missing so much time and Minshew at the helm. But I feel like we could be looking at more efficiency for Pittman. So I'm excited about him here. And obviously Kincaid goes next, of course.
Of course, because
And
he
then
was the
Nico.
number 1 guy. Yeah,
And
those
Nico.
and Jared Goff. Yep. All right, cool.
Wow. There we go.
Got a question here from Mystic. He says Jalen Polk and a late 25 first or Zay Flowers. To me, this is an easy Zay Flowers.
I'm with you. I'll take Zay there. It's probably because I like Polk. I just don't like him that much when I'm looking at a player like Zay Flowers, I guess would be the way I frame it. If you told me that was a different running back that I would really like to start, like a Rashad, even as much as we talk if we wanted to trade him, like if you told me that was Rashad White in the first, I probably wouldn't do it. Montgomery in the first, I probably wouldn't do it. But the fact that it's Polk and I don't view him as a starter in a format like this, I guess that's what I should have asked you, Mystic. Is there like a super amount of starters? Because otherwise, there's no way. I'll take Zay Flowers pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. Tyler says, what are your thoughts on JJ McCarthy on a win now roster for this year?
Interesting question. I have him on one. He's kind of excess on my team, and I would like to move him, but I just feel like it's not quite the right time to move him. If you have the luxury to hold, I think that's probably the play. I find, at least right now, Andrew, I haven't been able to move JJ McCarthy after the rookie draft anywhere near what I think his value truthfully should be.
Yeah, I agree because
Dang,
I think his
Pitts is a good pick there for the record.
yeah,
I
he
like that
fell
pick.
too far. I actually wasn't even really thinking about tight end right here, but when Pitts came into the fifth round, it was like I just had to do that.
Had to
But
take it. Yep.
um, yeah, man, I think for the win now question, I mean, everybody who kind of watches this channel kind of knows. I mean, I got the Viking stuff in the back. Like my I guess my temperature check on what this is going to be for the Minnesota Vikings this year is it's probably going to be more Sam Darnold than you want. Like that's the way that I view that this year. So if you have McCarthy and you think that he is going to be the starter week 1 or you think he's going to be a starter even like week 4, I can't imagine that McCarthy is the starter week 4 unless like I guess training camp he's just balling out, which is going to have to be at like really abnormal I think for a rookie quarterback to come in and just do that. But
Yeah.
I think this is a guy where even looking at the schedule is tough, man. Like I think week 9 and Victorious here, he says it like week 10, week 9, that's kind of where it starts to lighten up on our schedule. I think Jacksonville's around that time. Like once we get to the Jacksonville game, I think that's when you throw JJ McCarthy in and you kind of see what he has. If Sam Darnold hasn't been winning games, I mean, I guess that's still a possibility as well with this roster, but
Sure.
um,
When is your
I just don't
bye?
week I want to say it's like week 9 or 10.
It's a later buy. Okay.
Yeah, it's late.
I was curious because I feel like a lot of times in a situation like this, if it was an earlier buy, it's like that's the perfect pivot time. Like I remember they did that with Tua, even after Fitzpatrick actually played pretty well. But it being that late in the year, I feel like that would be a tough time to wait until that point. But I'm with you. I think actually some of the games you mentioned. But
Yeah.
with that being said, like what are you holding then? Are you kind of holding until he's going to be seeing the field?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like
Okay.
I have faith that McCarthy is going to be a solid asset, and he almost feels like a guy that no matter what, his value is going to increase in Dynasty. Like as
Yep.
soon as he starts games, and as soon as people start seeing him throwing touchdowns to Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, and they start seeing that offense, his value is going to go up. I think at least if it's not. If people don't view him where Jared Goff is right now, I think people will start to view him at least where Jared Goff is. And that's not where he's being drafted right now, obviously, because Jared Goff went in, what was that, the 4th round?
Yeah.
Or 5th round?
Is that 408?
Yeah, 408. So I think that's kind of where McCarthy can get to if people are going to do it. But Victorious, he says it's going to be a rough year, 5 to 7 wins. Abdul, he's a Vikings guy too. He says it might be a tough season for us. And we said the the Vikings are underdogs in pretty much every game in Vegas this year. So
Dang,
it
that's actually
is,
kind of interesting. I would not have guessed quite that bad. Wow. Okay.
yeah, I think the only one that they're not underdogs in is week 1 against the Giants. And then every other game the rest of the year, I think they're the underdogs.
That's actually pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm with you. You know what's funny? So Drake May comes off at 602 here, and I feel like it's almost to July. It's like the redraft mindset maybe for a lot of people is starting to kick on a little sooner, and I think that's why we're seeing the increase in drasticness from Jared Goff to May and McCarthy, because it felt like right around the NFL draft when that happened, those guys were going maybe 3-5 picks apart, like very much the same range. Now you're talking over a full round. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I get it, and I know there's for both those guys, they may not see the field right away, but I mean, we're playing for it. This is Dynasty, man. Like those guys have. Drake May's situation is a little different because we have no idea what the offense is going to look like, what the talent is there. McCarthy is surrounded with Jefferson and Addison and eventually Hawk. It's interesting to see him go quite this far, and I'm thinking about taking him here. Sheesh.
Dude, I love all this Vikings love we're getting in the chat here today.
I mean,
we do not get this much Vikings love normally.
On your channel, I feel like you maybe it's just because it's my first time on with you, but I'm like, man, everybody's talking Vikings over here.
Dude, I love this. This is awesome. We need to do this more often, guys.
I'm not gonna do it though.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking about taking McCarthy because I feel like there's a kind of a break and a gap in tiers that I'm drafting here.
7 seconds.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Xavier Worthy here. Upside play of Xavier Worthy. Keep building out the receiver room, and I don't want to give my hand away. Oh, but there went McCarthy. It was between those two. Normally, I'll tell you I would take McCarthy. We'll see I'm kind of be honest with you. I'm kind of experimenting here because it's a mock draft to see what happens if I play this strategy. But I normally don't like to fade my quarterback 2 past the 6th round, and I feel like I need to start actually toying with it to see if I like it.
Yep, I agree. Look, we have somebody says somebody tell Johnny it's Superflex because we are now how many picks in and no QBs? 6 picks in, no QBs.
I love it, man. Johnny Detroit is I think he knows it's Superflex, but I'm curious to see if this is.
Oh, he knows.
First of all, the Detroit start is just insane. Can we just acknowledge? You want to talk about being a homer? Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Laporta.
Yeah, I mean, and he had the ability to take Jared Goff there at the 404 and get that like super stack.
That would have been crazy. I see you take James Cook here. Talk to people a little bit about James Cook and who else was maybe front of mind for you there.
Yeah, so I had a couple guys in my queue. Jonathan Brooks was one of them. I was thinking about Jonathan Brooks, but because this roster, and maybe I shouldn't be making decisions like this in the draft, but because this roster is built a little bit more to try and go get a championship this year, Jonathan Brooks, not sure what he's going to do for us year one. And we've talked about it before, especially on the BDG channel, where year one is probably the only year you should be looking at those those running backs, because after that, it's hard to project anything that happens with the running back position. Sure. Other guys that were on the board would have been Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those were the 2 other guys that I had on my board. But because I had 2 wide receivers already, I didn't go that way. They both came off the board.
JSN just came off. So
yep.
Did that well, it probably didn't clear your queue, but it cleared who you were looking at the last pick.
Didn't clear my queue, but I'm in a tier now where I don't love a lot of these players. I mean, the Josh Jacobs, the DeAndre Swifts, I don't love a lot of these guys. But because this roster is a little bit more. Actually, I'm just going to take a conviction pick. This is a conviction pick here.
Lean in.
It's my guy, man.
I knew you were going to do it. I knew it. And it was going long enough. I'm like, he's going to take Bryce. He can't hold
I
off.
thought about it too much. I was thinking between Mike Evans and Bryce Young.
Smart.
But I thought because of
I feel like Bryce is a very smart pick there.
Evans just feels too old almost, that like in a startup, unless you're like really, really going, then I don't know if I'm drafting Mike Evans at 30 right now.
Yeah, I will say the 7th round is where I'm interested in the 6th. I normally would have to have the later part of the 6th if I'm even going to consider it. The 7th is where I start considering Evans. To your point, though, there's always enough guys in the 7th round to make you think, should I really take Evans yet? Like, is this too soon because of the age? And it's funny. I feel like I have to now.
Now you have to.
I think I do. I'm late enough in the 7th. I'm looking just to make sure. There's another player in my queue that I like. I think will not make it back to me. I prefer Evans to Diggs because of the uncertainty of Diggs in the new offense. And I definitely I think Adams could end up outproducing Evans for a year, but I feel like Adams is a little bit older, enough to make me think that Evans is a better pick in Dynasty. And maybe that's wrong process.
I would agree. I think I have Evans over Adams in my Dynasty ranks. And actually, I can even confirm that. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I do, too. I feel like I like Evans at the 708 here. And it's a nice blend with a young pick I just took at Xavier Worthy last
If
pick.
Bryce Young wasn't on the board, I would have smash picked Mike Evans. But because Bryce Young was there, I keep getting looped into this Bryce Young thing.
Oh, damn. Cousins went. And then Benson. Okay.
I got Mike Evans above Devontae. I have Evans at 30, Devontae at 35.
All right. So, yeah, I'm probably pretty similar. I should look. I'll tell you one thing, man. I didn't even say my queue. The people that I'm considering, they go quickly, like the next couple picks after I'm up. So,
well, somebody said in here, let me see if I can find it. I had it in here. They said our draft strategy is any player that Adam even mentions.
See?
So
there we go. I'm going to have to keep a few things a little tucked to the vest. You know what? Enough yapping, all right? You guys are cut off until I make my pick next time. No, I'm just playing.
So it sounds like whoever you mention, whoever anybody mentions, they're next up on the queue for everyone.
Yeah, they got no chance.
Abdul says he wishes this was a real league because he likes the team so far. So,
you know what? Can I tell you? I wouldn't mind this being a real league because I rarely Andrew, I rarely ever get. I have one share of Justin Jefferson in 18 leagues. I rarely actually
Sheesh.
get him. Yeah, he's hard. He's almost unattainable. It feels like most people don't even want to consider trading him. And what they would, so it's either he's unattainable or the offer is so disingenuous. It's like you got to send everything. Three great players and a first round pick. It's like, all right, well,
Yeah,
I'm not doing that.
Nick made that video where it was like players that I won't trade for anything, like no matter what, just being ridiculous. Like Justin Jefferson, obviously for me, he's a guy that like if I have him on a roster, you could offer me 7 first-round picks, and I'd probably just say, "Nah, I'm good." Just because I have to, out of principle, I have to keep Jefferson on my roster.
Nah, I'm with you. I will trade Jefferson, but I will admit he's one of those guys where it's like I'm gonna ask you to give me something that if you actually gave me that offer back, I'd be fine with the return. But
yeah,
most people just won't.
Yeah,
you got to overpay. Exactly, you got to overpay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make you overpay. If you want to overpay, fine. Otherwise, I'll just take Justin Jefferson and keep him. Man, I'm definitely having a hard time picking here. Especially knowing I don't come back till 9:08.
And anybody you say Abdul's going to take because he said that's his draft strategy right now.
I know he's not going to make it back to me. I'm going to go ahead and just go. I'm going to start leaning into a little bit of age here. I'm going to lead into a little bit of age here. Yep.
What do you think about this question from Tyler? He says, "What are your thoughts on stacking a wide receiver room like Nico, Tank, Diggs, or Allen, DJ, Rome? Like, what do you think about getting multiple guys in the same receiving room?"
So it's actually a really good question. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Andrew, but I'll just answer for me. I actually don't mind it. The way I view it is stacking a lot of the options in a receiving room like that. Now, when it's 3 like this, it's a lot tougher because for example, if there's 2 really consolidated options, I love having that. Like, I don't actually mind having Godwin and Evans or something like that. When it's 3, it's a little bit different. But the way I view it is my floor is raised weekly, but I probably do not quite have the same ceiling as if I had 2 number 1s or number 2s in a different offense. But I think in this game, sometimes the really safe high floor can be underappreciated.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to be picky about which rooms you do that with. Like you also got to just be grabbing talented players, or maybe there's a guy that you have conviction in that's like not being valued appropriately to you in the market. I think a guy that some people maybe would be able to do that with is like Jameson Williams. You either love him or you hate him. People have conviction in Jameson, or maybe the Green Bay Packers where you have a Jaden Reed and you wanted to add a Dontavion Wicks as well, or something like that. That would be my thing. Is those would be the 2 situations where I would do that. But I don't mind it. I actually quite often, I think sometimes I find myself having like last year I had a lot of Diggs and Kincaid stacks where I get the tight end and the wide receiver. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. With the tight end, it's the same thing. The same receiving options in that room.
Taking your guy.
I mean, I knew I wasn't going to get him back, so I didn't say his name, but I knew he's not making it tonight.
Yeah.
For the record, I was taking either Adams or Amari there.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I took Adams, Andrew, because it's a mock draft, but I feel like I rarely ever actually get the chance to take Adams, and I feel like in the 8th round, I'm like, you know what? I don't think I would pass on Adams in the 8th round personally. So I feel like I'd take him there. I rarely see him fall that far, though. Honestly.
Yeah, he fell a little bit far in this cluster of running backs. Like, there's so many guys where like I could have took Swift.
10 is crazy.
He was on my board. Swift was on my board. Even Joe Mixon was on my board. You know how I feel about him.
I know you love Joe. Yep.
But then I'm like looking at guys like Najee and David Montgomery, and I'm like, there's not really a big difference between all of these guys. So I don't know. Now that I said their names, I have to take one of them. And so I am going to take just a guy. This is another conviction pick, and you can speak to this one as well, too, because I know you like this guy. But Najee Harris, I'm going to take him as RB2. You have guys like Javonte on the board, Kamara on the board, Montgomery on the board, but I feel like none of them feel like they have the one a little bit. Obviously, Najee has a little bit more youth than some of those guys, and also I think he has bell cow usage coming his way here in 2024, whereas guys like Javonte and Kamara and Montgomery, I don't feel as confident in that.
Sure. No, I'm with you. I think Arthur Smith, the last time he was an OC, I don't think Najee Harris is the same type of player quite as Derrick Henry is, but I feel like the way that they use Derrick Henry, I could see Najee getting. I'll just say this. I said this actually on, I think it was AMA yesterday. I don't think we'll ever see Najee get to that workload he had in his rookie season. That was just outrageous what he had in his rookie season. It's just ridiculous. But I think to your point, he could end up being someone that gets a lot more touches than he has the last 2 years. And I think this offense, we may not like it, but I bet you it's going to be better than people give it credit for. Dang. The two running backs I really like there just went, which kind of hurts.
Monty and Kamara?
Yeah.
Would you have had Najee over those two?
No, I have it exactly like this. I would have had Najee, then Montgomery, then a Kamara. And I feel like the next group is definitely further down for me. This is, you know what? Put my money where my mouth is here. Michael Penix.
Okay, that's a brand pick. You had to do that for the brand.
Yeah, I did.
But what do you think about? Actually, go ahead. Talk through it.
No, you're fine. I was going to say. Go ahead.
There we go. We're going back and forth. Because I didn't want to get off of Najee. Somebody says, "What do you?" Abdul says, "Are you guys buying into Najee not being on the Steelers in the near future? Do you think that that's something that's probably? I mean, they didn't extend him.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't give him the fifth-year option, which I feel like at this point
doesn't matter.
No, because fifth-year option, like Najee hasn't played up to the level to earn the fifth-year option. Frankly, I feel like you'd be better off getting him in a contract after the fact. I think what's interesting though is it makes most people don't view it this way, but that's the way I view it. Najee's playing for a contract now all of a sudden. Yeah. This is a guy that was a first-round pick. You know, every year he's just like, I got that first-round money coming. The way they're going to use me early in his career, thinking they're going to use him that fifth-year option, kind of the franchise tag thing they had going with Le'Veon Bell. Now you got to go earn it. So I think he's going to be hungry too.
Does he not just feel like a Jerry Jones signing?
Oh goodness. That's actually not a bad play and a call. I think you're probably onto something there. I think he would be someone that Jerry would love to get at the end of this year. I feel like they're going to be wanting something more presence in the run game next year. So that's a good call.
For sure. Yeah, it could be in the draft. The running back class is really strong next year. Also, it could be Najee Harris and just bring him to Dallas. But we do have a lot of people with the Penix energy. We knew that was coming, Penix to the moon. So talk through the Penix pick for the people. I'm sure they've heard it before.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I did a whole breakdown, 30+ minutes on it. I can yap about Penix for sure. This is kind of where, when I saw, can I tell you this was part of my experiment that I felt like in a mock draft, a little more so than in a real draft, I would have a good chance. Mm-hmm. But when I saw McCarthy and May go in the 6th, I'm like, you know what, man? I bet you I could wait till at least the 9th, the 10th to try to snag Penix. Let me just try it, because one of the things I really like trying to do here, and a couple startups I'm going to be doing before the season starts, I'm going to see if I can get this done. Now that everyone's seeing this and watching this, I probably won't be able to. But I love actually with a build like this where I draft a couple older guys and I'm still trying to contend, drafting Penix as my anchor quarterback too. But he's not going to be able to play, because right now a lot of teams are, if you look across the board, I'm looking, most of these teams have 2 quarterbacks, if not 3 by now, right? So the reason I say that is I can wait probably for a good bit and kind of patchwork together the quarterback position at my Superflex spot until Penix takes over. There's guys like, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith. I can kind of just get 1 or 2 of them a lot later on and kind of get by there. And then when Penix becomes the starter, even if that's 2 years from now, there's going to be such a big bump in value, and I got him well after all the starters that are being drafted. So that's kind of my approach and what I wanted to do. I was very strongly considering taking McCarthy ahead of Worthy there. And in a real draft, I very much may have done it because money's on the line, but I'm like, you know what? I want to try this here. We got a timeout from Johnny Detroit. What happened?
We got a timeout?
Johnny, what happened, man? Hopefully that was just a internet connection thing. But all right, now that I did this, we only got one more pick until I'm going to take Chris Godwin here. I'm curious what your thoughts are with Chris Godwin. They're talking about a lot more slot usage this year. Are you buying into this? Are you at this cost? Are you in on Godwin, or where are you with him this season?
Yeah, I mean, at this cost, I don't mind him. I think for me right now, he's in a we got some explanation from Johnny. He says I froze with indecision. So
No way, an actual auto on the
tilted.
clock. That's
Yeah,
tough.
he tilted, man.
Damn.
But he's in a tier of wide receivers where I actually kind of find myself leaning other directions. So I don't have a lot of Chris Godwin. I do like Deontay Johnson more than I like Chris Godwin this year. You see other guys in this tier. Like I would prefer probably a Leggett to a Chris Godwin. I would prefer an Adonai Mitchell to a Chris Godwin. Even that Christian Watson that went just one above him, I'd probably take him over Chris Godwin. But I think this is a fine pick. I don't think it is a bad pick. I think he's probably just going to give you what he's been giving you for the most part. And he's probably going to step up from what he did last year. Maybe he's utilized more in the slot, like they said. But I think the ceiling of Chris Godwin is probably long gone by this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. What's interesting though is the last 2 years he was a wide receiver 2, like wide receiver 18, wide receiver 20. Would love to be able to put him in as a flex at this point. All the guys that you mentioned, for the record, I can get behind. I'm a little bit more iffy on Christian Watson. But all those guys that you mentioned, I probably would have picked ahead of Chris Godwin, but they all went. It was Deontay, it was Adonai, Leggett, and then I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll take some Chris Godwin here. Now I'm kind of curious to see what happens. Dang, Nuke Hopkins. I was seeing him go a lot later in a lot of startups, but I feel like this makes sense. I don't think he should be going nearly as far down in real drafts.
Victorious is putting the puke emoji on Adonai.
Mitchell. Interesting.
Man,
okay.
I love Adonai. I talked a lot about Adonai.
That person hates him. I wonder why people hate Adonai so much.
Well, look, it's the questions that we had all offseason, right? We had the talking points of Worthy versus Adonai. It's analytics versus tape and tape versus analytics. Like that's whatever you lean as a dynasty player. That's probably why you say, oh, I don't like Worthy, or oh, I don't like Adonai. I like both, for the record.
Man, Abdul took Russ, who I was thinking about.
This is going to be a brand pick as well. Just it has to be.
Do it.
We only have one pick left, so
I think I know who you're doing. Yep.
It's a brand pick here.
There was two people I knew you were going to be picking one of, and Troy Franklin was definitely one. I thought you might take Fields, but I knew with you having a third quarterback, you didn't need to.
Yeah, I had Bryce. I was looking at the only other guys that would have realistically been on the board would have been like a James Conner or a Zach Moss, but just for the vibes, give me Troy Franklin. If this was a real draft, I'd probably take James Conner.
Where would you take? Would you take Troy Franklin in the 11th? Like, I know this is the last round of this mock, so you had to get your guy. Where, I guess, like, where do you act? Is it 11th round? Is it 12th round when you start? Like, all right, if I want Troy Franklin in this dynasty league, I got to take him about here. Tom Brady, wow,
this is
the goat rings
crazy.
Pick. That's such a 7 goat rings pick, but I didn't think he'd actually do that. That's wild.
Yeah, while we're on the brand picks. But yeah, I think 11th round, 12th round, 12th round, like right there, that's where you do probably just look at Troy Franklin. I said some stuff on a podcast the other day that I do with my boy, and it was like, it got people offended, I think, because I did go a little bit crazy on some Troy Franklin hype.
Really?
And you know, I always say that, like, don't hear what I'm not saying before I say something kind of like crazy.
You said it a few times. The first time I heard you say it at BDG New York, actually, I was like, "What does that mean?" And I'm much more hip to it now. So yes.
Okay, yeah. So I said, "Don't hear what I'm not saying," but I was like, the NFL does at times get the draft capital wrong. I'm not saying that like Troy Franklin is going to be these guys that I list, but Amon-Ra St. Brown's a 4th round pick. Stephon Diggs is a 5th round pick. Tyreek Hill's a 6th round pick. Like, there's reasons why guys fall sometimes, and sometimes those reasons are not necessarily valid because the talent just wins out. They're in situations where they have the ability to kind of just perform. And I think as much as Troy Franklin's draft capital isn't what we wanted, it isn't what I wanted as a Troy Franklin fan, as a stan, as a truther, he is going to a situation where, quite frankly, a year from now, he could be one of the only relevant receivers on the roster. And it's That's just true. I don't expect Sutton to be there long term. Even if Sutton is, there's room for multiple guys. Even like people were upset because I was dismissing Marvin Mims, but there's room for Franklin and Mims to be valuable in this offense with Bo Nix under center, with Sean Payton calling the plays, because there just is nobody here. So somebody has to be valuable. I'm going to trust the talent in Troy Franklin. I think he's a beast. And I'm taking as much Troy Franklin as I possibly can in any type of format, any type of league this year. Maybe my redraft leagues, I'm not taking Troy Franklin, but I don't know. There might be a cost where I'm okay getting in.
Well, I mean, underdog is the same thing, right? You got a lot of exposure there.
Yep.
So, I mean, I actually don't hate. I think I said this on the underdog we did. I don't hate later on in drafts, kind of making a lot of similar picks to try to see if it hits, it's going to pay off in a big way for you. I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out with Troy Franklin. I kind of wonder if this was like a pick. You know what's really interesting? Terry McLaurin is a guy that comes to mind. Now, granted, he was a little earlier than the 4th. He was a 3rd-round pick. But that one felt like, if you remember, they drafted, R.I.P. What's the guy's name? Haskins, Dwayne Haskins.
Yes.
And then they drafted for him Terry McLaurin, wide receiver out of Ohio State. It felt like a lot of the same vibes there, where it's like, all right, Bo Nix, we want to go get him his guy, and he fell. And I'm kind of curious. I'm like, you'll never know the answer to this. I wonder if there would have been more of a free fall if it wasn't Denver pairing him with Bo Nix, because it felt like at that point they're like, all right, we can't even believe Troy Franklin's here, and we should get our quarterback his running mate from college that he has good chemistry and rapport with. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. I think he was a guy going into the draft that I liked a lot, and the more that stuff was coming out around the draft, some of the stuff in the combine, I don't think he did as well as I was hoping he would. And then the draft capital obviously fell to here. I feel like Troy, at least for me, and this is a gut thing. There's no rhyme or reason for this. I feel like it's going to go one of two ways. I feel like he's going to end up being someone we're like, damn, how did he fall to day 3? Yep. Or we're like, why did we not just give up on the fact that Troy Franklin, that so many teams passed on him? I don't really see the middle ground. I feel like it's going to be he ends up working out and he's a really good weapon in this Denver offense, or there's just other players that are going to get looks in that offense. But I'm curious to see how it shakes out. And at the price of 11th, 12th round, like there's not many players on the board here that you feel super secure in what they're going to be for this season, let alone in future years too.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to once you get out of those top 12 rounds anyways, we're talking about get your guy territory anyways. So I agree. It's not, I said I have to reach to get my guy for the brand. It wasn't even a crazy reach. I think he was down in ADP, right where Luke McCaffrey was, and Luke McCaffrey went 11-11. So
no, you took him maybe a few spots ahead of ADP, but it wasn't.
And realistically, in a draft where I have that long turn waiting around, if I really want Franklin, I probably have to do it anyways, because I can't imagine he comes back around, maybe unless I'm the only guy who believes in Troy Franklin. But sure. There was one question here, and I kind of like to do this at the end of mock drafts, and I know we got about, 15-ish minutes left. So I want to kind of look at the draft board as a whole. I want us to talk about both of our teams, talk about our strategies, and then kind of talk about what we want to do. So somebody actually beat me to the process. Hunter, he says, Adam, can you comment on your thoughts for your strategy, I guess? Interested on the thought process. So I will highlight your team right here and talk us through your roster, talk us through what you did and why you did it.
Yeah. So I took Jefferson at the 108. I strongly considered Rich, but Jefferson at the 108 feels like a guy that I just can't pass up on. On the way back, Caleb Williams was staring me in the face, no brainer. I really wanted to make sure I secured my wide receivers here in the 3rd and the 4th, as opposed to at that point I think I would have had to take a guy like Tua. No, Tua wasn't even. Tua was gone. Who was it? Oh, Purdy was there. It was do I take Brock Purdy? Do I take Rome? I wanted to continue to pass on the QB, and I like what I've paired up here. I have, let me just count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 receivers, and this is when I'm building my team, for the record. I think I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. I want to have, in a format like this, we're starting 10 in this, right? Yeah, start 10.
Yep.
In a start 10 league, you can start up to 5 receivers. Pretty much that's the way I'm going to be doing it with the flex. So it's typically either 3 receivers, or if it's a 2 receiver format, you can start 3 flexes. So I'm starting 5 receivers. Then I basically build my room out with 7 wide receivers, like Xavier Worthy and Chris Godwin. I'm not necessarily sure how good they're going to be in points per game. They're going to be my wide receiver 6 and 7 for the lineup purposes. Rome also too. I don't know early on what it's going to look like for him. But now I just talked about guys on my channel, running backs that I would be drafting later here. They're all still on the board, for the record, if we kept going. So guys in my queue, I'm going to start just basically taking running back all the way through, which is going to be guys like Devin Singletary, but 3 guys I talked about in the video I just released today, actually. Raheem Mostert, Marshawn Lloyd, Jerome Ford, all available in that 12th, 13th round. So I kind of build out the running back room there. And then I'm basically at this point, if I don't get a guy like Ingram, maybe Njoku or Ferguson, I'm going to punt tight end. I'm going to go probably get my guy Noah Fant like round 16 or something crazy. Kind of just wait on the tight end position as a whole. And then later on, like if Noah Fant doesn't pan out or I'm really down at that position, I feel like I can probably find a way to go buy a tight end somewhat reasonable in the market at some point down the stretch.
So I wanted to kind of dive a little bit into you. A lot of people see that tight end premium and they think like, man, I got to start paying for the tight end. And you're actually saying that you would punt it even further if you missed out on a certain tier. So talk about why, even though it's a premium, you would push it down the road.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the tight end premium, it depends on how heavy it is, but a lot of times the word tight end premium makes you feel like, oh, I should draft them earlier. Not that you shouldn't, but a lot of times that pushes them up the board too far. And what I really don't want to do, like Ingram, I feel like can be a top 5 tight end. We saw him; he was last year, and Njoku also was last year. Ferguson in a full year with the snap share he had with Dak. Those guys, at least you can say there's a range of outcomes where they're very meaningful. And basically in tight end premium, all it does is it raises the tight end position scoring. But if I don't have one of the elite producers, like the next guys that you're going to probably be drafting are going to be like Dallas Goedert. Like I don't want to be drafting a guy that realistically is just a middling tight end ahead of like kind of chasing the higher end tight ends, but I don't actually have a chance to get anywhere near those guys in points per game. At this point, I'm kind of out of that race anyway. So I'm just letting tight end continue to fall. I'm going to draft someone that basically is super cheap. And then if I do have to try to go get a tight end in this type of a format later, I feel like you can buy them cheaper than drafting round 9, round 10. Because there's a lot of guys on the board here that you could slide into your lineup. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. I would have taken if you would have fell to me. Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins later in the 10th. Like there's some good starting players, starting caliber, skill players that are not tight ends still there.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Well, let's look at my roster here. I went with Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, got that stack in Philly right off the rip. Dak Prescott, DJ Moore, Kyle Pitts, James Cook, Bryce Young, Amari Cooper, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, and Troy Franklin. So
I like your team, actually, man.
Now, I didn't actually get as many wide receivers as I wanted to get early on. I probably, looking back at this, like if I probably take Addison or JSN there where I actually was talking about James Cook, I think I actually probably feel just a tiny bit better. I think I saw James Cook and I like James Cook and I just pressed the draft button and it's a mock draft, so I didn't take it too serious, I guess. But the reality is that Jordan Addison, JSN, they probably make this team feel a little bit better because, like you said, you still have Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, like guys down the board. Where I took Troy Franklin, like James Conner could have been a pick there, and I would have had Jordan Addison. So would have felt probably the same way there, but kind of same idea. I like to go with the double quarterback early. That's just a strategy that in my Superflex leagues I like to do. Getting a guy like Jalen Hurts, getting a guy like Dak Prescott. I feel like I have 2 hammers at the quarterback position where these guys are going to be able to carry me almost by themselves. I know that Mike did a video on the 6-point passing touchdowns format, but like we talk about those hammer quarterbacks, like they can actually carry you to a playoff appearance, and these guys can do that. And then Kyle Pitts, it was a value pick. Bryce Young, value pick, conviction pick, and then just worked my way down the board, I guess. So that's kind of how it went. With that said, though, is there anything, and this will be the kind of the last talking point before we get out of here, unless we have any questions from the chat. So if you guys have questions, throw them in here before we get out. We'll answer some questions. But is there anything on this draft board right now that stands out? I like just looking at the board as a whole after and seeing if anything stands out. Does anything stand out to you?
Well, I was just going to comment quickly. I think actually, though, I like your team, but I do think that the point you made, and this, whether it's a mock draft or not, a lot of times you can just look back and be like, man, if I could do it over again, I would have changed something differently. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Reflection, I think, is the best way for me to improve my teams in Dynasty is fucking it up, doing something like drafting
Yep.
James Cook. And it's not that I don't even like James Cook. It's like, all right, well, if I could redo this now, I think I'd rather have JSN and have Najee and Tony Pollard as I wanted to, and then continue to draft
Yep.
running backs. Nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
I am looking to answer your second question here. I'm really trying to think. I will say this. Zay 4. It was funny because Johnny Detroit, it was right after Zay took McCarthy. Someone was like, someone let Johnny know that it's Superflex.
Yeah.
Now, I think Zay 4's team is pretty nice in its own right. I'm not the biggest, I'll say similar to like James Cook, I'm not the biggest Kenneth Walker and the fifth person. I was surprised he went ahead of Achane. I took Achane at the 508. But when I look at this team, you got 3 pretty damn good receivers. What could be, you're very high on Dalton Kincaid, what could be a monster in Dalton Kincaid.
Mm-hmm.
And then you still get some solid QB options. I think what he'll end up doing as quarterback 3 will be interesting, but I don't hate his build and waited on quarterback a good bit. I think McCarthy in the 6th round, May and McCarthy in the 6th round is actually kind of pretty good value. I like his draft. Nick AV's team, what are your thoughts on Nick AV's team? Let me ask you that. I'm curious what you feel about it.
I think his team's solid. The only thing that I feel like getting a guy like Kyron Williams, getting a guy like Derrick Henry, it kind of is similar to my James Cook argument for my team, where he has CeeDee Lamb, he has Tyreek Hill, but then it's Hollywood Brown, Cortland Sutton, and this is a start 3 wide receiver. Like that was the lineup that was presented to us. So you're going to have to start Hollywood, or you're going to have to start Cortland Sutton, and then you have 2 flex spots that you have to fill every week. I think instead of Henry or instead of Stevenson, I don't mind you going Stevenson as the RB2, and then where you have Henry there, maybe you are also taking an Addison or a JSN or something like that. I think he's 1 wide receiver short from being a very good roster.
What I was going to say is, okay, I'll put it like this. Kyron and Henry, to me, they're polarizing players. So, like, I actually feel like in this spot, CDU's probably pretty early at 105, but at the same time, he's my wide receiver 1. I get it. You get the 2 elite receivers here, right? And you get the stack for Tyreek and Tua at the 305. You get Goff. But then you go with if you wanted to in the 5th and 6th when the running backs are falling a lot further than ADP. I don't hate that. And I'm similar to what you feel here, but I would have personally, if you would have taken like Amari Cooper or Christian Kirk there instead of Ramondre, I could be like, all right, this team is a little risky because you invested the 5th and the 6th in Henry and Kyron. But if those 2 guys are hammers, it's like, damn, this could be a team that's kind of really hard to unseat because you're well-rounded. So obviously now what Ramondre is in this New England offense will be, he should be someone you're flexing, taking him at the 808. So it'll be interesting to see how this team would shake out. But I'll say this, when the running backs are falling, I don't hate that type of a move. But I'm with you. I think one running back a little heavy there. But that build actually is kind of intriguing to me. A lot of times in ADP you see these running backs go higher, but if they're falling here, that's kind of an interesting build he took there.
Yeah, and I think that's also something that we should point out, is because we said it when the running backs are falling, but where Cook and Henry got drafted, they were actually probably the first of the guys that started to fall a little bit, because you have Swift that went far down, Mixon that went far down. So in hindsight, you obviously didn't know that they were going to fall, but then they all fell. So we just kind of got the first guys drafted in that tier of the guys that fell. So it was kind of bad luck, I guess, in that situation. But one thing that stands out to me that I want to talk about just slightly is Trevor Lawrence. He fell to the 311. I think he came off the board as, what is that, QB 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16?
16. Yeah, that's right. Goff would be 17. That sounds right.
That feels far.
No, for sure. I mean, I'll tell you, Andrew, it was interesting when I was thinking about him. It was Rome or T-Law for me, 100% there. I felt like the upside Rome possesses is a little higher, but truth be told, T-Law last year hurt. Like he could end up being discounted. When Purdy went off at 310, I'm like, tell me there's no chance that T-Law's coming back to me, is it? He ended up going at the 311, but yeah, I'm with you. But I'll tell you this though, T-Law being drafted there makes a lot more sense. It's like, the upside that he possesses, I'm willing to find out at that spot. When he's going closer. A lot of times in drafts, you see him going a lot closer to like where Herbert and Daniels are. Not that that's a bad spot for him, but like if you're drafting him ahead of Dak, to me, that's kind of rich. But if you drafting him after Tua, after Purdy, the only quarterback going like later than him in the first 4 rounds is Jared Goff. That's a pretty good value. I'm with you.
Yeah, I would draft him at that cost almost every single time. Because I even have him still like right there with Dak, Tua, and then it's probably T-Law. So I know only Purdy's the only guy that went above him, but I'm considering T-Law there in that early third, and you're getting him at the back of the third, almost into the fourth. That just feels like a good value, especially in the Superflex and your 12-team leagues where there's just not a lot of QBs.
If you're Disco Spider, you have to love if you took Bijan Brees there at the turn, right? And T-Law falls all the way back to you. That's like, damn, how did this happen?
And then we talked about, getting that wide receiver 1 in the 4th round, and we even said Brandon Ayuk, and that's the guy that he comes along with. So, and then he loads up Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, like some young guys there as well. It's an interesting build. But
it's not the way I like to draft typically, but I'll say looking all things considered and the way that you started off, like I don't really hate it, honestly, man. I really don't.
Yeah, I saw the 2 running backs come off at the turn, and I was like, "Oh shit, this could get ugly quickly." Yeah. But it actually, Trevor falling and Ayuk being there, it actually worked out fine. So, we got a couple questions here we'll answer before we get out. So let's pull this over here. We will pull this here, and then we will go here. But here is the first one. It's from T. Mitch the Goat. He says, Superflex start 11, which side are you taking? Caleb Williams, JSN, QJ, or Puka, Pitts, Vidal? This is a tight end premium half point.
Okay. Puka or Caleb? I want Caleb over Puka there. I want Pitts a little bit ahead of JSN. Vidal and QJ, not a huge. I think overall in a Superflex start 11, the way that I feel about the tight end position, I've already kind of aired out. So, like, while I definitely prefer Pitts to JSN, I think I'd rather the Caleb side here. I feel like it's a lot harder to get a guy quite as talented as Caleb than it is to now you don't have a quarterback back here. So, unless you're telling me that Puka side, if you're getting Puka and Pitts, but you have excess at quarterback, like a fair amount of excess, I definitely want the Caleb side.
Yeah, and actually, he says, I've never done that type of bully RB in Dynasty startups. I actually really like how it shook out. So tried something new, like the way it came out. I like it. Now we have another question here from Big Red. He says, is there a certain week or a situation during the season where you decide to sell, buy, or hold for that year? Basically, like when should you be going in or out?
Yeah, I look at it like this. When I can view my team, when I'm looking at myself comparatively in the playoff standings, if my team right now is 80%, 90% of the way locked into a playoff seed, I'm comfortable. Now, it doesn't mean I'm gonna just start spending all my draft capital willy-nilly, but now it's like, all right, I feel a lot better about sending away my first, knowing that, all right, maybe it's a 107, but I'm in the playoffs type mix, and if I end up doing really well, it's a 111, 112. What I don't want to do typically, though, is if I'm not sure of where my team is, send away my first too early, and now it's like, dang, man, this guy could be having a 102, 103. I need to get that back. I hate being in that position.
Yep. And actually, I am in kind of the same, I guess, ballpark as you there. I actually have said, and I guess sparked, a sense of creativity for Koopa actually over where you guys are at to dive into what I said on your last AMA, because I said, I like to have the buy secured before I decide that I am like going all in. Yep. And he actually did pull some data on what that looks like. If you're a buy team, like how likely are you to win a championship? What is the actual probability of you going in and winning and things like that? And the data actually backed up what I said. So I was actually happy to hear that. The data actually backs up that thought. But it seems like for the most part, like if you're a first seed, second seed, maybe a third seed, like that's when you can really buy in. But really, you want to be the first or the second seed if you're getting 2 teams that get bye weeks in your league. If it's only one team that gets a bye week, then maybe you're a first or second seed only that even considers that. But that's kind of the way that I like to do it. Obviously, if your team's not looking good, you're getting hit with injuries and things aren't looking great, that's when you sell out. I feel like that one's more self-explanatory than when to go in. When things aren't looking good, you just sell out, man. That's the way to go. And not like crazy, like don't sell everything. Keep your young guys, keep your draft capital, but those aging assets, they got to go.
Yeah, and sometimes on the sell side of it, if I'm the first team that's coming to sell, a lot of times you can get everybody else that's trying to still with this competing mindset. You can end up being the only store in town that's really selling assets that are of the contending mindset. So you might be able to reap the benefits of, picking and choosing. Like I think this team still could miss the playoffs, but here's Derrick Henry, something like that. A lot of times you can do things like that.
And that's sneaky because then you get a team that misses the playoffs and you get their first round pick or something.
And there's Derrick Henry for you,
Last question here. Dabadubby says, would you trade Jalen Warren and a 26 first for Achane? What if it was a second instead of a first?
I would 100 times out of 100, I would trade Jalen Warren in a second for Achane.
100 times.
Yeah. The first, I don't think I can do it. It's tough, man.
Even 26, it's 26.
I'll tell you why. I think the ranges of outcomes, if Achane pops off, you definitely win. But I just when I look at it, what can I do with this 26 first without just moving it as a 26 first? Could I get a 26 first and my 25 first? What does that buy? It's almost like the opportunity cost lost to do this, where it's not. I wouldn't say it's terrible. It's just I don't feel like it's a good enough value to make me want to buy Achane. I don't have a problem with it, but if it's a second, it's not even close. The first makes it. I feel a little uneasy.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit. I think I might be okay with the 26 first, but I think that's maybe more so me not being a huge believer of Jalen Warren. I know he has a polarizing fan base as well. A lot of people either love Jalen Warren or they hate him. I'm okay with doing it. Obviously, I'm only sending first round picks and buying running backs if I'm in a contending window. And I think Achane, he has the ability to have league winning upside. And so if you're in a contending window and you want to have a guy like Achane on the roster, we've seen it. I don't mind it for the most part here. A second, I'm definitely doing a first. I'm probably leaning towards doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even hate I'm not the biggest fan, but it's probably fair value. And if Achane ends up being him, you're gonna love that trade.
Yeah, we got people saying do another draft, but we can't. We're on the way out of here. Adam has some stuff going on tonight. He's on a stream, so you guys should. If you're, what do they have to be to see that stream tonight?
Come check out the Patreon. You can be if you are in the Savage tier, you can be on the stream. But anyone that's in our Patreon for $1 a month, you can come join, hang out with us on the live stream. It's a blast, man. I'll just tell you this too. We make it a patron-only event because we don't want to put that type of chaos into the air on the YouTube channel. Mike and I already kind of toe the line pretty good as far as getting canceled, so we put some of our patrons on there, and we're in trouble. We're cooking.
Fair enough. They're calling us cowards. It's all good. But we do have a couple people saying thanks for the draft. Love you, Han. And then we have appreciate you, and thanks for the good content and the draft. So that is it. If you guys tuned in today, you guys can find Adam's stuff. I pinned it in the chat, so you guys can see all of his stuff from South Harmon here. It is pinned in the live chat. If you are watching on the replay, it is going to be in the description at the top. You guys will see it there. It'll be BDGE Dynasty and South Harmon Fantasy Football for all of his stuff. Some of our stuff over there too, if you haven't checked it out. Yeah. But Adam, anywhere else they can find you at? Anything else before we get on out of here? This is kind of your last chance.
No, man. This is all I need. I'm consolidated. BDGE, South Harmon. Now, finally got a chance to come on the league. This is where you'll find me, man. You'll find me in some guest spots, but those two things.
There you go. And look, they're saying they need another one, an ASMR. Yeah. Yeah.
I just caught that at the end.
Yep. But they're saying we'll need to do another one. We'll do another one here eventually.
Yeah. Listen, man, I'm always love coming hanging out with you and chopping it up. So anytime, you just let me know, man.
Hell yeah. All right, guys. Well, we will see you guys on the next episode. But until then, peace out.
Peace.